Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming at you from Film Fanatic headquarters. It is Thursday, about 10 o'clock. Hope everyone's doing good. So, it's the holiday season, and like I mentioned in a couple of previous episodes, Santa was very good to me this year. So got some. Apparently, I wasn't too naughty. I was pretty nice. So I got some cool gift certificates to my favorite place, Boneless Music. The uh, the holidays is always a fun time of year for me. I always enjoy it. Always said I have a huge amount of nostalgic memories around holidays, mainly being Halloween and Thanksgiving, and then especially Christmas. Christmas and Halloween, it's a pretty close tie as far as nostalgic reasons why I love the holidays so much. And they're particularly heavily steeped and tied to lots of different films, which is, a pretty obvious thing for me and for, the stuff I do on this channel and the movies I cover. So, it's a way of life, and it's a wonderful thing. It's always tied to me in many different ways, as far as music goes, pure escapism. It's a big source of inspiration for me artistically, if you want to call it that, and just personally, and my general kind of philosophy around how I, more or less live every day. It's just part of the that whole experience. So it's been great. So I've been diving deep into a lot of movies. Plus, I've had some time off. I always watch a lot of movies, but I've been watching even more. So it's been great, and I've been watching. My collection has been getting bigger thanks to Santa Claus, and I've also been watching more and more movies. So it's been really awesome, and it's great. So before I get into this movie, talk a little bit about some other things that are happening. I'll be starting to get ready for the show, a quantum show that's going to be taking place on January 13th. It's actually Friday the 13th. So slowly getting ready for that, putting together the sets for that show. It's been a while since we've had a show, so I'm trying to get the ball rolling or keep the energy going as far as some of the momentum that we had over the summer. I'm trying to be a little bit more proactive with some gigs around the winter time. We are in the midst of winter right now, so I'm trying to, keep some of those things going and keep some of those things alive. This summer was really great, and we have another album that's pretty much ready to go. So I'm thinking about plans as far as how, we'll go about putting that out. We'll probably do a show or two in, probably the spring, summertime of next year, probably centered around an event where we're going to try to have a bunch of different bands and fellow electronic artists on the bill also. So I'm looking forward to putting that together. I've said before too, been really fortunate with this year. We've I've come in contact with many people that are also doing electronic music. My friend Ronnie, who I play in a band with, who has a side project called Enor, which is all of this great ambient electronic music. He calls it like wallpaper music, but he has that kind of thing going. But he also has tunes that are more, I guess, dominant or to a degree, or a little bit more amped up, and they're more like featured kinds of kind of material. The material is more of a feature thing. And it's very electro. It's got all kinds of influences from like obviously like rock to to dubstep to lounge electro music, experimental stuff. Really cool. Really hard to define. And then my friend Halsey, Eric Halsey, who is another amazing musician that I know and I'm fortunate to play with. He has a group called Halsey, which is very much in line, I think, to like more of a modern kind of hip hop kind of vibe. His stuff always reminds me of Thundercat, who folks out there who don't know who Thundercat is. One of the greatest musicians around on the planet these days, and he's definitely like an electronic artist, but he has many different things going on. Particularly, it's a I feel it's a continuum of the whole kind of hip hop uh, sound. So Halsey has very much a sound, I think, that's influenced by that, but yet it's his own thing. So, and then Spencer Roulard, who's another guy I play with, who I've played a couple times with this year, and he's really awesome. He does this really great modular synth stuff that's real ambient, and we played a show together also this year that was really fantastic. And then another person or guy I just met, Wally, who plays guitar in the Mallet Brothers. Mallet Brothers are a real popular band here in Maine and also nationally. They tour all around the country. He's the rhythm guitar player for that band, but he has a side project, an electronic based group called the Button Men, which is this very synth heavy kind of 80s, uh, somewhat of a dark wave kind of a sound, but very 80s sounding, and it's killer. It's really great stuff. So we're in the midst of putting together a show with that group also. So it's great. So moving forward, when we do eventually have another album release show for this next album that's in pretty much done, the gonna definitely put together a show where that's gonna be a featured thing where we're gonna like showcase and do it with other groups, particularly kind of related to what we do with Quantum. So I'm really excited about future prospects. And then also can't forget my friend Tom Luther, who I'll be doing the show with on the show that I mentioned before. It's February 13th at the Poor Farm. And Tom Luther is an amazing guy, an all around amazing guy. I look up to him in a lot of ways. I was again fortunate enough to play. I've played with him in lots of different bands over the years. First and foremost, he's probably just an amazing. Well, he is like an amazing piano player, one of the most creative people I know. But he also has his feet uh, pretty trenched in the world of electronic music, and he has a group called Sphere Music, which is really amazing. It's just this really great ambient electronic music, very very much has I feel a soundtrack vibe to it. We've done we did a show together last year, or actually this year over the summer, and it was really great. It was actually at the Poor Farm, so we're going to be doing another show on the 13th of February. Oh, sorry, January, and that's going to be coming up. So really excited about that. So stay tuned for that. It's on the Friday the 13th, so it's a good date. So yeah, very excited about prospects of moving forward with the band and as far as different opportunities and different ways that we can bill ourselves with other groups that are kind of doing something similar but very different. And the main part of it is just the idea and how it's all original based music. So which to me is my ultimate kind of at the end of the day my ultimate focus and trying to showcase that material because I feel like all of these guys that are doing this kind of music is the music is really strong and it's all eclectic. It all has its own personality and each guy has their own style and it's very 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 good and I find it for me very inspiring. So yeah, so stay tuned for more things like that coming up in the future. So it's very going into 2023 I'm very excited about all of those prospects and Also, one of the things I'm working on is trying to find a situation where we can do like a residency, where we can have maybe every other month, or once every 2 months or so, where we would have like basically a music showcase with these groups, and have different lineups for each show, and change things up a lot, and just have bring hopefully a wide variety uh, of music that can showcase all these guys. So yeah, very cool. And like I said, Santa's been really good to me this year, especially this Christmas. I had been going to Bull Moose a little bit more than I usually was going in the past. Typically, I would go like once every month, or every 2 months or 3 months. But I financially, things are a little bit better this year in some ways, so I was able to go a little bit more. I went actually quite a few times, probably a little too much, if that's such a thing. And I was going to Bull Moose quite a bit, and so I've been buying lots of new movies. So it's been fabulous. So this movie, and again, I've been mixing things up a lot for my own, as far as my own personal tastes, or as I should say, as far as things that I've been buying. I, you know, started out, when I was diving deep into collecting movies. I was buying, years back when I started buying movies, pretty at a pretty rapid rate. I was most of the movies I was buying were all DVDs, and I would typically only buy movies that I had seen before, or that I was really familiar with, or it's remembered from a few years back at that period. But mainly it was like focused on movies that I had seen before, and I'd always wanted to see them on a really good quality DVD presentation, or in a DVD presentation. So initially, that's how I was, as far as I guess from a collector standpoint. And then eventually I got into Blu-ray. I was really reluctant to going into Blu-ray, just because I didn't want to have to buy even more copies of the same movies that I had. But then things shifted for me, and I got to see a lot of films that I love on Blu-ray, and I was hooked. And ever since then, I've never looked back. So, and the prices are really fantastic. So I went ahead, and that's what I do now, as far as spending the majority of money of when I'm going shopping for films. I always usually get Blu-rays. I still buy DVDs here and there, but my focus is always Blu-rays. The other thing that I've done that's really different for me is I've been buying lots of movies I haven't seen before. And luckily, I have really, you know, gotten to some great places with that. I've really lucked out. I've gotten some really great and amazing films that I've never seen. I've taken a chance, but the prices are so great. Some of these films that I've done a little bit of reading on, or certain labels that I like, Blue Underground, Severin, Mondo Macabre. I've just really been excited by the the quality and the titles that a lot of these great movie companies have been putting out, and they have a real consistent thing. They have such a wide variety of weird and unusual films in the exploitation world, American and also foreign films. Lately, I've been buying tons of foreign films, so it's been really fabulous. But this is a movie, Eyes of Fire. This movie is just amazing. This was a movie I saw quite a few times when I was a kid. It was definitely during the time in the VHS days. I remember, and it was funny. I bought this just a few days ago. I used to see this. I remember seeing this a bunch of times when I was a kid on VHS, and this came out in 1983. So I was like maybe like 9 or 10, I think, when I saw this, after it had come out. And this was like a movie that was a regular thing that I used to rent a lot. I remember, yeah, and so buying this really high end quality Blu-ray is just was awesome. And I hadn't seen it in many years. So watching it, I watched this the other night for the first time on Blu-ray, and they were, it was funny because like all of these particular, well, mostly centered on particular scenes in the film, just came back to me, and I was like, oh yes, I totally remember this, and it was like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. And it just came back to me like I definitely had seen this. At first, I was like, I'm not sure if I seen this movie, but then when I started to watch it the other night, I was like, oh yeah, I definitely have seen this movie, and I've seen it many, many times. Just an incredible movie. It came out in 1983, probably one of the biggest, or I should say, one of the greatest kind of portrayals of like, of like the witch mythology, or like a horror film that is very much steeped into the world of the black arts, or the occult. This movie, I think, was one of the first movies that kind of explored those kinds of things. I remember as a kid, the first few films that I saw as that were, sparked my interest in the occult, but then they also were the first films that I saw that were in the occult realm, were films like The Unholy with Ben Cross, which is a really old school horror movie, super low budget, 80s movie. That was probably the first film I remember seeing as a kid that had definite ties, and tied into the theme of the occult and demons and all those great things. And also, the obvious Evil Dead, when Evil Dead first came out, Sam Raimi's classic, with the whole core of that story being centered on the Necronomicon, the ancient, Book of the Dead. That was a real pivotal thing. The other movie that really always blew me away is the original Wicker Man, starring Christopher Lee. That was definitely a movie that I was obsessed with as a kid. I have that on Blu-ray. I've had that for a couple of years. I'm going to eventually do a show on that, which definitely needs to happen. There was Spellbinder, this other movie from the 80s. That was another movie that dealt with these people that were supposed, Satanists, or that they were tied to the occult. And that was a film that really, piqued my interest in horror films that were not just slasher films, but they had this occult kind of element. This film, and I think arguably this came out during that whole period, and I think this is easily one of the best. It's right up there, I think, with The Wicker Man. It's interesting. It's basically, if you look it up online it's described as like a horror western, and which is kind of funky and kind of weird, because it does take place in the year 1750, and the basic story is a preacher, Dennis Lipscomb, leads his followers, Gus Boyd and Rebecca Stanley, west to a valley where the dirt holds the devil. And it was directed by Avery Crounse, and the screenplay was also written by Avery Crounse. And like I said, this movie came out in 1983, and this was the first film directed by Avery Crounse, who before this was a real famous photographer. He worked for various magazines throughout his entire career. He, he did work on various films, but his main thing was photography, and he was known for doing lots of kind of experimental photography. Avery Courts, or Avery Crounse, he's an award-winning director and photographer, and has written three theatrical films that have played worldwide. Avery also owns his own production company, Isilian Pictures. He directed his first film in 1983, which is Eyes of Fire. This film went on to become one of the most acclaimed films of 1984, and was called by the New York Times as a bizarrely fascinating story. And Crounse's visual imagination is extraordinary. His next film that he made was called the Invisible Kid, which I believe was another huge hit, and it starred Oscar nominee Karen Black. Amazing. Karen Black, famous woman and actress tied to the horror genre, Trilogy of Terror. Uh, just an amazing collection of horror films where she plays all three different roles. with the famous one being this, I think it was the Sunni Death Dolls, predated Child's Play by many many years, and it was originally a TV movie, but a terrifying movie, and it's a short film, and the collection itself of three films is just amazing, some of the best horror ever. But he went on to direct The Invisible Kid that starred Karen Black, and also received lots of critical acclaim. His most recent film, Cries of Silence, also starred Karen Black and Kathleen York and Ed Nielsen, and was quoted by the New York Times as an exquisite drama, and also went on to win numerous awards, including Best Picture and Best Actress for his daughter, Ari Buchanan, in the International Film Festival, the Giffoni International Film Festival. Besides his work in motion pictures, he's also an acclaimed photographer. His works have been published in American photography and the subject of television and documentaries, where his prints are seen in over 20 countries. So, yeah, just such an interesting background that Avery had, for his, coming into film. Avery Crounse, his background being in photography. So this film really is driven by the whole like visual aspect of the film, and the practical effects in this film are just awesome. It's very much a horror movie, but it's got that whole like ultra, it's incredibly low budget, but it's got this real gritty kind of exploitation vibe to it, which I just love. And the practical effects, the atmosphere is just great. And being Avery was, a world, renowned photographer, you really see that visually. And it's pretty commendable too that this was his first film, and this story was from his brain, and it wasn't based on any other folklore tales, or any short stories or any other books that came out. Just really commendable. And this movie totally holds up. Like, considering this came out in 1983, it feels like it like could have come out now. It was all shot in the woods. The whole film pretty much takes place in the woods of Kentucky, and so visually it's breathtaking, and the locations are just gorgeous, really lush, lots of colors. Super. It's got this real trippy psychedelic element to it also, and it plays into incorporating different mythologies from like pagan mythologies, traditions that are taken out of like practitioners of Wicca, and also it dives pretty heavily in Native American ritual practices. So it has an interesting combination of all of these different things. There's a lot of great symbolism. There's this kind of metaphor thing of where the natives, the indigenous people in this story, believe that the devil wasn't this stereotypical figure that lived in hell with like a pitchfork and welcomed people into their damnations. They looked at the devil as being, at least in this story, as being this earthbound entity that lived in the forest and also in the trees. So very interesting kind of take on that whole mythology around the devil or Satan, and also the occult. But amazing movie. The transfer of this on Blu-ray is just fascinating. There's an amazing documentary on here about the whole making of this film. And yeah, I can't recommend this movie enough. This is like definitely an unearthed gem from years gone. The interview with the documentary on here with Avery Crounse is pretty fascinating. He goes into detail about all of the his background being a photographer, and this was put out by Severin. Severin is one of the best companies And it's funny. I about a year ago, I was watching a show. One of the guys that I watch, Adam Caesar, who does a lot of great coverage and explore. He does lots of exploration into lots of great movies and books, particularly in the exploitation world and horror, the horror genre mainly. And this was one of the films he talked about, how it was, you know, kind of this lost gem from the '80s. And he had a Blu-ray copy of it, just like this, and he had talked about it. And I saw this video maybe like 6 or 7 months ago, and I was like, oh, I think I remember that movie. I think I remember it. And I remember when he held up the cover, that's when I remembered. Oh yeah, yeah, I remember seeing that as a kid because it's got this really cool, very distinct artwork that just pops out. So I was like, yes, I definitely saw that. And then just recently, I came across this other really great show on YouTube where they had the show had the creators of Severin, the guys who run Severin, which is the the really great, one of the best companies out there putting out all of these great exploitation movies. And they did a show where they just were interviewed about the nuts and bolts of how they run this company, and it was super interesting. But one of them, and they talked about some of their newer releases, and this was one of the movies they talked about, and I was like, oh wow, great. And one of the guys who was doing an interview had said that even I think it was this movie. He said that this film isn't really. He's not even a super huge fan of this movie for various reasons, but he thought the documentary was, and the special features were some of the best that he'd ever seen. And it's basically a whole like hour interview with Avery Crounse, and he said that was one of the most fascinating kind of behind the scenes special features component that he's ever seen on a movie. So it even piqued my curiosity even more. So the other day when I went up to Blue Moose, I saw it there and I was like, oh wow, awesome. So I snagged it up and it was super cheap and amazing movie. I can't recommend this movie enough. Definitely one of the best. I'm super excited that I bought this, and I'm gonna definitely watch this probably a bunch of times moving forward. So super excited. So I want to thank everybody for their support of this channel. It's been really great. I've been in contact with a few folks on the old YouTubes, and there's some really great folks out there that have been really supportive. I really appreciate it. And so if you like this page, please like and subscribe to it, and we will see you next time with some more fantastic movies. Peace.